Okay, and starting with Bolinas Fire District, Chief George Krakauer.
Here.
For Mill Valley, Todd Cusimano.
Here.
For the City of San Rafael, John Stefanski.
Here.
For the City of Larkspur, Dan Schwartz. For the County of Marin, Chief Jason Weber.
Chris Martinelli be sitting in his place today.
Chris Martinelli. Good morning, sir. For Inverness, David Briggs.
Here.
For Canfield Fire District, Chief Mark Pomey.
Here.
For Marinwood, Eric Drakeson.
Here.
For Muir Beach, Chief Chris Gove. For the Novato Fire District, Chief Bill Tyler.
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow Fire District, Chief Dan Mahoney. For the Southern Marin Fire District, Chief Chris Tubbs. For Stinson Beach Fire District, Chief Jesse Perry. For the Town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf. For the Town of Fairfax, Heather Abrams. For the Town of Ross, Richard Simonich.
Yeah, Richard Simonich filling in for Krista Johnson this morning.
And for the Town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery. And Chief, we do have a quorum.
All right, thanks very much. Any agenda adjustments? Okay, seeing none, it's now time for public comment. The public is welcome to address the Operations Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code sections, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphones when not reporting out. Do we have any public comment?
And there are no public comments.
All right, thank you. Item 5 is Planning and Program Manager's Report.
Great, thank you. I will be sharing my screen. And hopefully that'll do it. Great. So thank you everyone for joining today. I know we had a few conflicts out there at Cal City's meeting that took some of our folks away to Sacramento and other events. So thank you all for being here both in person and online. We're going to start this portion of the agenda by just acknowledging the ongoing fires in Southern California. Mark's going to say a few words and I'll add in a few things about what we're doing afterwards.
I think a lot of you have already heard or have been expressing the same comments, but you know, we as a society need to stop being surprised by these fires. These really aren't new. And if you look at our lessons learned document from 2017, you can almost see the exact same things from 2017 play out in 2024. So I think it's time for our member agencies and Marin Wildfire to continue to provide the leadership that we've been providing. And there's been 1,000,001 Monday morning quarterbacks showing up all over the place. We do not want to be those Monday morning quarterbacks. We want to be continuing to push forward. These are the actions we need our public to take. These are scientifically proven to be effective actions. And these are the actions that we as your member agency, as your fire departments and your public safety agencies, this is what we're doing. And so that one pager I sent you all, that was all designed to be those positive speaking points. I sent you that recent, the lessons learned. Really proud of how we as government within Marin County have taken action on at least 75% of those action items that were identified in 2017. So those are those messages that we need to keep pushing. We'll talk Zone Zero later on today, but I think this is our opportunity to help create a consistent Zone Zero ordinance. Chief Tyler, you brought this up at our last Ops Committee meeting. Is this year, this code adoption year, the year to do it? I think it is. And I think we got a lot of momentum behind it. And so with that, I'll pass it off to Ann.
Great, thank you. I'm going to test this mic and see if this is working. Testing. Great, thank you. Thanks, Mark. So one of the talking points for Marin voters is that, Marin is ahead of the curve. Passing Measure C in 2020 set us up really well to be prepared and to be proactive and not wait for the next wind event and ignition. So I wanted to just list out a few of the things that we have been doing consistent with this committee's strategic or strategy of maintaining the house out approach. We have been doing a lot of work at the home and the defensible space scale. For example, approximately 30,000 home evaluations this last season throughout the JPA, around 100,000 or so total since Measure C was passed. The CHIPPR program has been very active, both the JPA-wide program and then other individual programs as well. This last year, around 4,700 CHIPPR pickups at residences. We have a grant program to support members of the public who are doing home hardening and defensible space and trying to resolve issues that come up in their evaluations. We'll be helping around 425 to 450 homes this year, either through reimbursement or direct assistance. We are actively working on vegetation management along evacuation routes, although I don't have those statistics yet. I'm working with member agencies to gather both recent and past evacuation route numbers so that we can take a look at what we've accomplished since Measure C passed. So I'll have those for you actually fairly soon. We also are actively implementing shaded fuel breaks that are generally right in between homes and wildlands. And we've accomplished around 1,900 acres or so of vegetation management within our shaded fuel breaks. We're still gathering data from our member agencies, so we'll have updated numbers very soon. In the public education world, the numbers I have in this bullet point are already out of date because so many people have accessed videos online just in the last few hours that the numbers from 10 p.m. last night are behind. So Fire Safe Marin, of course, has partnered with us and many of you to create videos that are very useful, both within Marin and around the state and the country. Last year, Fire Safe Marin's videos were watched around 78,000 times, but this month alone, we've seen well over now 100,000 views of these videos. I also want to note that our annual report for activities within the 23-24 fiscal year is available online, and I want folks to know how to access it. So if you go to marinwildfire.org, you go to About MWPA, you go down to Annual Reports, choose there, and you'll see photos of some of our folks on the cover at a shaded fuel break in Stinson Beach. And thanks for joining us, Chief Perry. Just in time. So every year we summarize accomplishments for the last fiscal year, and we just released this annual report. So I invite you all to go check it out. A few highlights, the CHIPPR program continues to grow and support defensible space activities at the residences around Marin. It began April 8th, and there were 6 rounds of chipping throughout the different zones, nearly 4,700 pickups. That's another 240 more pickups than the previous year. We also picked up more cubic yards of vegetation in total, and average pile size was bigger, so the demand continues to grow. Our work with residences through the grant program and the direct assistance program continues to grow, and our direct assistance pilot program has been really successful thus far. The reimbursement program provides support for residents who do gutter guards, vents, fence attachments, and Zone 0 and 1 vegetation management. We blew through the budget for that very quickly and allocated around $800,000 for residents, and then had to add to that budget through pulling from other sources such as our administrative budget to help more residents. The direct assistance program is up and running, and our grant specialist has been working with our DSpace folks, our WIMs, to reach out to residents and send out letters inviting folks to participate in the program. And they're going kind of zone by zone to invite folks in. And then many residences are in the planning phase, and several have been complete. So around 12 have been complete so far. And this program has been up and running for a few months now, and very excited to see the change on the landscape and in people's yards. So some of the work that we've been up to recently includes coming up with a way to track what we're doing and work with the different member agencies to develop that program. We presented this information to the board in September at a high level, and then also dug into this program a little more with our environmental partners with the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership. We presented that on January 14th, and Jacob Dadman helped me present that. So big thanks to Jacob. We've been working with the member agencies to develop this program over a number of months. And generally, it was a phased approach, and it continues into the future. We first worked with our GIS contractor to set us up to handle geospatial data. So we developed a GIS program. We developed methodology for collecting data during project implementation. So when you're doing veg management out there, how are you going to collect the data? What are you going to record in the moment? And then we've been working with our modelers, our folks who are helping us incorporate science and data into our decision-making to figure out what parameters we should be measuring to inform our models and make them more accurate. We are also looking at a couple of key things that we may want to measure in terms of ecological changes. For example, out on the San Rafael San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone project, last year we had acoustic monitoring out there to detect what birds were in a before plot. And now we're putting equipment back out there to see what's out there after work is done. Maintenance intervals is another great way to use this data. How often should we be going back out on the landscape to do maintenance? For example, how quickly is broom regrowing? So we collected July through September 2024, as well as past project implementation data. That's about 480 different polygons that were submitted to us by our member agencies. So thank you to all of you and your staff for doing that. We continue to collect data, and more data is due to us at the end of January. And all of this helps us track what we're doing and where, tell that story to voters and the public, tell it to all of you and our project managers, so we have a better sense of what's happening and where, and it's standardized across all the different 17 member agencies. And that helps us with our science-backed decision-making methodologies that we're working on as well. I want to remind y'all that in March, we are inviting folks to Marin. The state's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meeting will be here in Marin in March, March 27th and 28th. Mark's been working hard with various teams to talk about what that's going to look like. The task force generally sets the agenda, but we get to, have a say here and there as well, host some field trips, highlight what Marin is doing. So we're really excited about that. There's also a Climate and Wildfire Institute meeting that week that we'll be helping with also. Mark, is there anything else you want to say about that?
The one challenge with the week that they picked for task force, it's also the International Association of Fire Chiefs WUI conference in Kansas City. And so there's going to be, that'll create a demand or a division of a lot of people are going to want to go to the WUI conference. Well, this is an important workshop as well. So yesterday we did propose to the task force that they move their date so that people can attend both the WUI conference and this meeting. We should know by Friday. But I wasn't getting the warm and fuzzy from them when we talked about moving the date.
Fair enough. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so wanted to just let you know that we continue to host field trips. It is a really effective way to talk to the public and answer questions and get folks real answers rather than letting rumor mills fill in gaps. So, as you know, we start engaging with the environmental community while we're still thinking about and doing the environmental compliance. We engage with the community during the work plan development, of course, and as all these proposals come in during the environmental compliance process. They know about projects when they're approved at the board and moving forward, and then we bring them out to show our work. So we really love to walk neighborhoods and drop off flyers and let residents know about this opportunity to see the work and ask questions. Our latest was January 17th at Ring Mountain Fuel Break. We worked with Southern Marin Fire folks and Marin County Parks and the ESP partnership, our environmental partners. It was a great event. Southern Marin staff did a fantastic job presenting this project. And we had about 50 people there, including, all of us, but a good turnout, a lot of really thoughtful questions. I continue to encourage field trips and all of this engagement. This is a photo within the fuel break. This was all very tall broom before work was completed. If you all have ideas about field trips you'd like to see, please let me know. I'm just going to end with this very complicated slide just to get it in the slide deck. We have the process all laid out for this season for coming up with our proposals and projects for next fiscal year. We can add these slides to the archives online so you have this available to you. So I wanted to get that in there. We're at the stage now where we are just starting to submit JPA-wide projects and proposals into the portal. We want to do that by mid-February to get that in a little earlier this year than in previous years. And then we'll start talking about zone-specific projects and proposals. The ATC is meeting regularly as a working group now rather than a public body to think through challenging and technical issues and talk about projects and proposals. So we're excited to get all this work underway. And I will stop showing this very complicated text-dense slide. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ann. Thank you for both Ann and Mark for that report out. Are there any questions for Mark and Ann on what they've covered?
I just want to thank you for the report, and there's a lot of really great data there from last year, and I was wondering if you guys are coordinating with Fire Safe Marin to be putting together some kind of social media campaign on just like telling the story of all the great work that we've done in the last year. I know on our end, and I probably think everyone's getting this, is we're getting a ton of questions from our community on what is our preparedness, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to just highlight the work of your team. So just wanted to ask that.
Our team, member agencies, teams, everybody. And yes, we have a one-page ad, I think, coming out soon in the IJ that will be highlighting the efforts that have been going on. And then that one pager that I gave you guys of speaking points that it's not really a public-facing document that we gave you. It was kind of to give you context of how to frame some conversations and perhaps put it in your guys' voice. But we are going to be working with Fire Safe Marin to have some public facing talking points to send out for you. And then you guys can either put your branding on it, send out yourself, or reshare what we share.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'll also note that the process of developing our data collection and monitoring program has been a really great kind of two-way dialogue to talk about what work is happening on the landscape and where and when. And so I think that is really going to help us facilitate that conversation of like, hey, where are crews going to be this season? Maybe the public would like to know ahead of time that they're going to be in this neighborhood or that neighborhood. And so I think that kind of communication on a regular basis is going to be a lot easier now moving forward.
Any other questions from this group? Just had a couple quick things. One is with regards to the direct assistance with the 12 completions. I know that's sort of a time-heavy lift on some of those. There's a lot of hand-holding, that has to go on with the individual homeowners, et cetera, from time to time. Are you guys keeping track of like about how long it takes per, is there anything you can share with us, or at least maybe you can get that info to us later?
I don't have that information readily available at the moment, but yes, our grant specialist is tracking that and also working with our WIMS who this is the off season, and so they're available to help with that work. Yeah, so it involves a site visit, coming up with kind of the list of to-dos for the contractor, and then making sure that the contractor does what needs to happen, and then tracking that. I asked our grant specialist about how much is getting spent per residence, and it's about $2,000 per house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Josh is looking at and working with the D-Space inspection teams is to kind of, and it would be a small tweak to how the inspections are done, but if there's a small tweak to how the inspections are done, then that can make the creation of the work plan for that property easier and save time down the road. So we're looking at creating that efficiency.
Yeah, no, great. I'm just curious. It's kind of like been a pilot. I think it's very important, and just to provide us as much evidence to keep it supported at the right level, will be important for it to be successful.
And there's a lot of lessons learned in this pilot.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I saw, like you said, 171 referrals or something. That's a lot, and just have 12 done. But maybe there's a point at which, a bunch more will get done, before the end of the year.
Yes. Yeah, letters are getting sent out in batches. And so some of those, in fact, I think about 100 of those letters just went out in maybe December. So there hasn't been much time to get work underway yet, but with the holidays especially. But
Yeah.
yes, those numbers will go up.
Okay. And then second item was, I know that you've done a tremendous amount of work with each one of the agencies on taking a look at the tools and the studies that have been completed, and then how to try and integrate that information to help us focus on the work plan going forward. And at least from my staff, it sounds like it's been very successful up until this point. And I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you have to say about how that integration will continue. So for example, I think we've done some pathways studies. I haven't really heard back on where that is, where that's landed. And then maybe you can give an example of how we might integrate some of that in as we look at this plan going forward. For example, I think we had talked about splats, a year ago, or if you guys remember that word, that strategic, work that's being done on larger area parcels. But can you provide any update on how we're integrating that stuff and where we are with that tool?
Yes, item 9A today is a discussion item specifically on that topic. So we will dive right in a little later.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Going out to the public, any comments from the public? No hands up? Okay. All right. Now we're at the item 6, consent calendar. This is the minutes from December 12th, 2024. The recommendation is to approve or approve with edits. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Eric Marinwood.
Okay, so we have a first and second. Just going out to the public.
Thank you, sir. And starting with Bolinas,
Yes.
Mill Valley,
Yes.
San Rafael,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Inverness,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes.
Marin Wood,
Yes.
Novato,
Yes.
Southern Marin,
Abstain?
Stinson Beach,
Yes.
Town of Ross.
Abstain.
And it looks like we have a unanimous vote for all in attendance minus 3 abstentions.
As long as it passes.
Motion passes, sir.
Okay, there we go. All right, thank you. Item number 7 is an action item, chair, vice chair elections. So the recommendation is to initiate the election procedures.
Yes, so with our chair retiring, that does leave a vacancy. So every January, we choose a chair and vice chair for both the ATC and the Operations Committee. A big thank you to Chief Hilliard, who stepped up to be the chair of the ATC, and Todd Lando, who is now the vice chair of the ATC. Now it's time to hear who would like to volunteer for these positions for the Operations Committee.
All right. So we are looking for a chair and vice chair. Is that correct? All right. So just looking to this group, perhaps if we have volunteers first for any changes, or I don't know if obviously I am going to be retiring at the end of February, so I would love to stay and continue, but that is not in the cards for me. So looking for all of you to see if there's any volunteers for chair. I don't know if our vice chair would like to move up to chair and have a new vice chair, or anybody volunteering.
Should be a chief being the chair. I mean, should really, this discussion be led by one of the fire chiefs. With support from some of us, Eric or John, you guys want to be the vice chair, I'm happy to pass it on to you. But I'm happy to continue as the vice chair, but I do think a chief should be the chair of this group.
Okay, so we have, thank you so much for stepping up to continue to be in that role. It looks like, so that's part of our nomination here. Do we have a fire chief that's in the room, or what happens? We pick a fire chief that's not in the room?
That's always fun. We can do that.
We did for ATC.
Okay, of the fire chiefs that are in the room, would one of you like to step up and, it's a super great job. I gotta
Hey,
tell you.
Bill, maybe you can.
You guys make it easy.
Maybe you can design, or you could describe the workload that we put on the chair.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's what you do all the time, and just running meetings. There's, most of our work comes around the work plan and the other sorts of things that go on with that retreat or whatever. But this is a very easy job. The staff make this so simple for me, and the communication's always been very good. So being in this position, I think. Is something that each one of you would want to do. I don't know if you can have a retired annuitant in the position or not. I'll keep coming.
I'll just say generally, as the chair, you're obviously facilitating these discussions at the Operations Committee meetings. You're also taking part in more of this ad hoc subcommittees and working with me to review draft agendas. And I'm terrible to work with, so, apologies for that in advance. And attending some board meetings here and there to report out from the Operations Committee. So that would be helpful. Chief Krakauer, I think you're getting nominated.
I mean, we can second that. Do we really need him to give feedback?
Is he on the meeting today?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
He just took himself off mute.
He's-
I am, I will not be careful with my words here. I'm happy to try and learn and make time. Although I feel like there may be somebody a little bit more qualified, but if somebody wants to help me through it or give me some guidance, I'm happy to try and make that happen.
The other thing we could do is just, we could, I thought this would just, someone would step up to do this. So there are a couple of people that aren't here. We could have some offline conversations and bring this item back. Or I think what happens is if you don't have the number one, then the number two is the number one and the number two.
Sound like my
I can
kid.
pledge to George, if he's willing to be the chair, we will give him every bit of support that he needs and help guide him through these meetings. I like that. We've started getting into moving a bigger department, smaller department trend for the chair. I think there's positive aspects to that. So George, if you're willing to step up, we will give you every and all support. And I see Todd Cusmano making a suggestion.
Yeah, and I can add to that. Yeah, look, I'm happy to help run meetings and help with some of the technical support of it as well. I just think symbolically and for some of these discussions, it should absolutely be a fire chief. That's all. So if a fire chief's willing to do it, as you said, Mark, I'm happy to help facilitate and run any meetings and support him as we go.
George, you're running out of excuses, buddy.
Yeah, no, the only thing I'll say, and the reason I'm mostly available by Zoom is, it's often hard to be in person in meetings and depending on the time of the meetings and stuff, there may be some conflicts there. So that's the only thing that I'm up against. I am still very much operational out here as part of the staffing to the day-to-day operations as well. So that is kind of a little limitation, but I just want to put that on the record.
Yeah, I mean, I also, and I appreciate that, George. I just want to make sure that it works for you. I also happen to believe that Jason would probably say yes again, or he just couldn't say no. So I know he's doing something for us today, but otherwise has always stepped in when it's needed.
I would maybe suggest or ask, if it doesn't need to be determined right now, that we maybe reach out to some of the other folks and see. And I'm happy to maybe go under their wing or just make sure nobody else that's not here doesn't want to do that.
Okay, so we obviously want someone that can commit and fully participate, and so my suggestion then would be to we've got half of the nomination done. Let's go ahead and table this. We'll move it to the next meeting and work to have certain conversations so that we can come back with someone that's ready to go. Does that sound all right? Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to need a motion to what? Table this to move it to next?
Mhm.
Okay, so can I get a motion to table this and move it to next meeting? Chris Tubbs?
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a first and a second. Let's go out to public for comment.
And there are no hands for comment at this time, sir.
Okay, if we can do a roll call, please.
Certainly.
Oh, we're moving it to another meeting.
Bolinas,
Yes.
Mill Valley,
Yes.
Sanderville,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Inverness,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes.
Marin Wood,
Yes.
Novato,
Yes.
Southern Marin,
Yes.
Stinson Beach, Town of Ross.
Yes.
And that is unanimous approval to move the vice chair and chair elections to the next meeting.
Okay, item number 8 is committee reports. Technical Advisory Committee.
Great, thank you. Both the chair and vice chair had conflicts and were not able to join today, so I'm just going to quickly report out and let you know that we did choose a chair and vice chair at the ATC, as I mentioned previously. At the last meeting of the ATC on January 9th, we went through the available tools and the science and the methodology and just kind of gave a high-level overview of what that working group has been discussing, and we're going to present those slides today as well. And then we also talked about potential changes to the bylaws. So as you know, now the ATC is not a public body, but more of a working group. That includes staff from the different member agencies, as well as our non-voting at-large partners, such as UC Cooperative Extension, Fire Safe Marin, National Parks, State Parks, County Parks, PG&E, Ecologically Sound Practices, et cetera. So, so the changes to the bylaws thus far are all redlined and generally just kind of clean up and simplify the bylaws and turn them into more guidelines for how the group is going to function. Will it continue if there's no quorum? Do you continue with the meeting, et cetera? So fairly simple agenda, just reviewing the tools, and that's it for the ATC.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions on that report? Okay, seeing none, going out to the public.
No hands raised.
Okay. That is not an action item, so we'll move on to number 9, discussion items. Review of available tools, 9A.
Great. So I'm going to start us off and share screen and provide a bit of a high-level overview of what we have been doing so far and the status of things. And then we've got consultants on the line today who can help answer questions, and I'm going to invite Scott Farley to provide some further information. Scott Farley with Willow Labs. Yeah. Great. So we started meeting with the ad hoc subcommittee of the ATC, plus a few staff members who've been involved in project management and project planning and data collection last September. And we started off with kind of an overview about why we're doing what we're doing, and these are some of the things that we discussed. Our board and this committee have committed to using data and science to help with decision-making, help determine where taxpayer dollars should be spent. And the idea is not to replace expert opinion, but help augment those conversations so we have more data to for decision-making. We can use this data and these models and these tools to help inform a discussion around where to maintain existing projects. So existing polygons on the map, where should we put our maintenance dollars? Are there some places that are more important than others to maintain? We can talk about where new projects might be located. Are there gaps on the map that we should be addressing on the greater landscape in terms of vegetation management or other parameters as well? We can take a look at how much we're reducing risk with these projects. We can come up with an estimate and generally quantify how much we're reducing risk. We can use the data that we're collecting and the science to help adaptively manage our work, our project ideas, where dollars go, what kind of treatment we're doing within polygons. We can use this information to help communicate with the public, with future voters for a future ballot measure, and communicate with other regions who are looking to us as a model and would like to know how we're doing and how effective it is. We can also use this information to communicate with the insurance industry. And as you know, Mark has been working in this arena and really thinking through how best to protect residents of Marin and reward the good work that we're doing here in Marin in terms of insurance. We can also use this information to help make our grant applications more compelling with granting agencies at the state and federal level. And we can talk about how to best maximize bang for the buck and what bang for the buck even means for us. So this work also helps inform our measuring of our success according to board-approved goals and strategic measures. And I'm just going to remind you of a couple of the goals and strategic measures that we have already approved by the board. Vegetation management, I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, I wanted it in a slide so that then it can be in the archives for this meeting. You can take a look. But this is in our strategic plan as well, which gets updated whenever new strategic measures are approved, et cetera. So we're trying to measure not only how much vegetation management is happening on the landscape, but how effective it is. So there are various strategic measures trying to get at that. The same with D-space and home hardening, not only how much is getting done, but how effective it is. So you'll see different ways of trying to measure that in ways that are doable, feasible. So for example, how much are you reducing flame length? It's a simple metric that we can use kind of as a proxy for reducing risk. So over the last several months, we've been meeting with different member agencies. This all came from the discussions around these tools and kind of a last minute attempt to use some of the tools to help inform decision-making last season. And you might remember we kind of dabbled in it, played around with it, and it was clear that we needed more discussion about what the methodology would be, how we would use it, and really dive into kind of the limitations and the opportunities with each of the tools. So we started meeting as the ATC ad hoc subcommittee last year, brought in some other staff members from the different member agencies, and we've been meeting quite a lot since early September. We talked about tools around shaded fuel breaks and the risk modeling there, pathways analysis, the on-parcel risk analysis, Vibrant Planets platform, which is a little different from those, the evacuation risk assessment. And then we talked about kind of summing up all of those, how to use them, and next steps in December. And the idea here is to give staff members and members of the ATC and others the chance to pick apart all these models and tools and methodologies and talk about where the data is coming from, how the models are going to get updated with future project implementation data, and think through how each one is useful and how you might be able to combine efforts to give you a better story about how to inform these conversations around projects. So we brainstormed a lot, asked a lot of questions, dug into to all of these tools, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a high level of those in a moment. We also talked about some basic assumptions. So we started the conversation with the assumption that kind of these shared assumptions. So Marin Wildfire and member agencies are committed to using available and emerging data, tools, and models to help Marin Wildfire and its member agencies make decisions about how to use taxpayer dollars most effectively to reduce risk. Assumption number 2, all of these data sets, tools, and models are very useful and contribute towards decision-making and should be used to supplement but not replace local expertise. Assumption number 3 was using these, these data, tools, and models will be more useful over time if we consistently track and standardize that tracking of project implementation. So we're gathering data, what are we doing and where within the JPA, and then we can then feed that information back into the data sets, the models, the tools, so that we keep them updated and they don't become outdated. And then we had kind of a set of general questions. How do we actually use them? How do we use them to measure our progress against our goals and objectives and metrics? What does biggest bang for the buck really mean? We talked about that last season, and it's a great phrase, but what does that actually mean? So dig into that and really think through how to maximize benefit. And it may mean different things to different agencies in different regions with different efforts. And then how might our data-driven approach differ between existing projects and future projects? So within existing projects, maybe we use it to determine frequency of maintenance. And if certain portions of a shaded fuel break are really, really critical, maybe we maintain that every year. And other portions are less critical, maybe we maintain that every 5 years. We can dig into that versus new projects on the landscape. Are there gaps in kind of the shaded fuel break network. So the tools that we looked at within the wildlands and WUIs included fire pathways, vegetation management, shaded fuel break assessment, and the Vibrant Planet platform. These tackle similar questions in different ways. So fire pathways would be, where does fuel and terrain and wind align to produce rapid fire spread towards a community? Where might vegetation management intercept those pathways, either within linear shaded fuel breaks or maybe splats on the landscape? The veg management shaded fuel break assessment, where can linear shaded fuel breaks at the edges of communities reduce fire behavior? What portions of existing shaded fuel breaks are the most critical to maintain? Vibrant Planet platform, where on the landscape are opportunities to reduce risk that we're missing, and use kind of a generalized data set to that users can then kind of weight different variables and manipulate to come up with their priorities. Within the built environment, the on-parcel risk assessment uses the fireside data and all those great inspections out there to tell us how well prepared a community is to resist fire once it arrives. The evacuation ingress egress risk assessment tells us what roads are most at risk and what variables contribute to that risk. So with the pathways analysis, again, you're talking about where does fire move most quickly across a landscape? Where would fire enter communities first? You're looking at 3 different fire weather scenarios. So a Diablo wind, a northeast wind scenario from the northeast, entering and maybe an ignition outside of the community where fire would enter a community. The northeast Diablo wind event from and an ignition within a community moving outwards, and then a dry sea breeze out of the west. So all that hot, dry air sitting out over the ocean reverses direction, comes back on land. You're using an existing peer-reviewed fire spread algorithm. It's consistent with the fire physics with other efforts in Marin. You're running several different simulations to see where the different pathways then overlap, and that's where you get the greatest confidence in terms of where fire is going to move across the landscape. So how to use this tool within existing projects, you might identify where existing projects interrupt pathways and where frequent maintenance might be the most beneficial. For new projects, you're identifying areas where new polygons or expanded polygons might reduce that risk. Vulnerabilities, you're identifying locations to step up work, maybe within the built environment. If there's residual risk, your shaded fuel break isn't adequate, maybe you're adding some home hardening defensible space work within the community in certain locations to really beef it up. You can measure success, so estimate how much vegetation work would be needed to slow down arrival time. And next steps with this pathways analysis is to work with Willow Labs, Scott Farley, who's on the call today, to really dig into an area and explore it. And that's what the different member agencies, staff members have been doing over the last several weeks. The veg management effectiveness for existing polygons. This is shaded fuel break risk modeling, where you're quantifying change in fire behavior within existing shaded fuel breaks by comparing current versus post-treatment fuels and fire behavior. So you're creating a composite fire behavior score for each pixel in a project area. Many aspects of the fire behavior include flame length, area in which direct attack is possible, so flame lengths under 4 feet, rate of spread, potential for fire to enter the canopy, spotting distance, probability of fire to reach a given pixel. You can take a look at composite or individual variables. Again, you're looking at the Diablo wind scenario, northeast wind versus a dry sea breeze or a dry sea breeze event. There's also some additional modeling, fluid dynamics, to address how wind moves around in the terrain. You can look at regrowth at 1, 5, or 10 years, and that helps you think through kind of maintenance needs. And then this is another place where our implementation data is going to be really important to help keep this, help fine-tune the work or this tool. So for existing projects, you might estimate benefits in terms of individual variables or composite fire behavior. This table on the right is estimated fire behavior changes within the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. You can also estimate how often maintenance needs to happen, and you can identify, again, residual threats. So maybe locations where you might want to beef up that defense through home hardening and defensible space or other actions. And then you can use this to estimate and communicate benefits of a project. So again, member agency staff were encouraged to set up meetings with Willow Labs, Scott Farley, to dig into this tool and see how useful it might be. The on-parcel risk assessment calculates on-parcel risk using fireside data from home evaluations. The parcel map, each map of each parcel showing how much risk different issues are contributing. So you can take a look at the different discoveries on a parcel and see how much each one contributes to overall risk. And you can also look at not only the parcel scale, but the neighborhood scale as well. So what issues are contributing most to risk in a given neighborhood? So is it fencing? Is it vegetation? Is it vents, et cetera? And then that can help you design a program that really addresses overall risk in different neighborhoods. You're using data collected during home evaluations to estimate on-parcel wildfire risk. That considers ember cast, potential combustion intensity, and potential for structure flame contact, structural vulnerabilities, and the role of home hardening actions, fuel bed continuity, and ignitability. You're also looking at a couple different weather scenarios, the Diablo winds again, and the dry sea breeze again. This model doesn't address structure to structure spread, but there are other efforts out there, such as folks in Berkeley and Colorado, who are working on this, and we're in communication with them. So we're hoping to expand that in the future. The tool might help you identify specific properties, specific neighborhoods, and different programs and projects that might be really useful given those specifics. You can also integrate data such as socioeconomic data into this analysis, which can be very helpful. Again, member agencies were encouraged to meet with Scott Farley of Willow Labs to discuss this further and how they might want to dig into different ideas. We also had Vibrant Planet come and talk about their platform. Their platform is being used. CAL FIRE is exploring it. Truckee just completed a CWPP using this platform. And it's a way of digging into different variables and allowing the user to weight different things according to their own priorities, and then coming up with a different set of suggested polygons on the map where you may want to do vegetation management. Again, these are conversation starters and not necessarily the end product of where you should do all your vegetation management. You're going to want to think through feasibility, access, sensitive plants, all of that. So this model includes vegetation and fuel modeling, the land fire, fire intensity modeling, and fire likelihood modeling. A lot of this is going to be similar to other modeling in Marin. We're also talking to One TAM's Danny Franco about how to incorporate forest health data through their efforts into the work that we're doing, including the Vibrant Planet platform. Vibrant Planet has already worked with us on other projects because they have been a sub-consultant to Panorama. So they did some of the analysis for the Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break and Novato Shaded Fuel Break. So they're very familiar with our work already. Yeah, so member agencies were encouraged to meet with Vibrant Planet folks who are also on this call today to talk about how they might use this tool in their zones. The evacuation ingress egress risk assessment is another tool that we've been exploring and encouraging folks to work with. Again, this group has heard about this tool in depth, but Vibrant Planet or STI should be here and available to answer questions about this. So this tool, again, for those not familiar with it, perhaps in the public, looks at various risk factors that make roads more difficult for evacuation. So took a look at fixed and variable risk factors out on the landscape and rated the different road segments according to those risks. So a fixed risk is something that we're not going to change through one of our projects, such as structure density or slope. A variable risk is something that we could potentially change, such as flame length, by doing vegetation management next to the road, roadway condition by working with Department of Public Works, or others on road conditions and fixing issues out there. The viewer of this tool, and this tool is available on our website, the viewer of this tool can isolate particular risk factors or look at multiple risk factors at a time. We found a lot of folks find it very useful to isolate just flame length and look at vegetation management opportunities along roads and come up with lists of road segments that need treatment. So the implementation data that we've been collecting can then be used to update these factors and update the tool. And so we're looking forward to using the data that staff has been collecting to update this and take another look at risk in the future. STI has been meeting with various member agencies to talk through it and explore how best to use it in this next fiscal year. So at this point, I want to ask Scott Farley to jump in and share screen because he's got some additional really great talking points and slides to help you understand how best to use these tools.
Great, thanks, Ann. Can everybody hear and see? I think yes. Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you. So Ann did a great job of covering what the tools do and how they work. What I want to spend some time doing with you today is thinking about how can they be applied? What kinds of things should we be thinking about when we're asking questions of our tools? And how can those tools work together to create kind of composite or consensus view of where multiple tools are telling us to do different kinds of work to reduce risk to our communities? So I've shared this slide with you before, and I think it's really useful to kind of base our discussion about the models in a discussion about what we are doing to reduce risk, right? So all the things that we can do to reduce risk, right? Working from the house out, we can harden the home, we can do defensible space, we can do vegetation management and shaded fuel breaks, we can move out into the wildland and we can do strategic area treatments, splats, as mentioned earlier. And we can also do things to alter public behavior, like improve traffic flow during evacuation. We can do better alerting. We can do better public education. All of these things contribute to reducing risk at the community scale. We don't just kind of pin on one, right? We do many of them. And so kind of same thing with the models. We can't just have one model that's going to say, here's your answer, right? Here's the projects to go do. We have multiple models that we can ask different questions of that can contribute to different parts of this system, can steer us kind of in the right way to design and track and measure the success of our programs as we move forward. So, right, we've got these different models and they're going to contribute to the various needs that we have of designing new programs, evaluating existing programs, working in the built environment, and working in the wildlands. And I think it's really useful to kind of break this down on these axes. So we have tools that if we want to go design a new program, new vegetation management, we have tools that help us understand where would be most effective. If we want to work in the built environment, we have tools that can help us work in the built environment. If we want to evaluate some project that already exists, we have tools that help us understand what is the change that we've experienced in the last 1 year, in the last 5 years. And the trick here is going to be applying the right tool to the right job, right? And then choosing the right tool. And then, as we'll talk about in a minute, kind of combining those tools in some ways that allow us to have multiple views kind of on the same problem. So we did sort of a survey, right, just now of what these different tools are, but I just want to spend a second kind of thinking about like, what are the questions that they answer? The tools are tools. They do what you tell them, right? but they, if we come up with the questions, can help us come up with reasonable answers, right? So if we have questions about where our hazardous fire spread is going to be and how effective our vegetation management projects are at interrupting that hazardous fire spread, right, that kind of points us towards fire pathways. If we have questions about evacuation and how fire behavior affects evacuation, that's kind of pointing us towards the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment, right? And just to kind of go on and on, right? Like if we have questions about where to develop new programs, that's where Vibrant Planet can be really, really useful in helping us with the ideation, the brainstorming, the understanding of where multiple benefits would come in to create a really good potential polygon for treatment. So certainly valuable on their own, and we've been exploring with different member agencies the way that they can be applied separately, but they can also be used together. And when we use them together, I think it allows us to understand where we have hazardous fire spread and vulnerable communities and the potential for vegetation management to interrupt that spread, or a potential hazardous evacuation conditions. And so it allows us to not just see where all the tools are kind of overlaying, but where all the tools with their different specialties suggest that work may need to be done. So it's not like we have many of the same tools that do slightly different views of the same problem. They're all viewing the problem differently. And when we overlay them, we can get a sense of, kind of pinpointing those areas of highest hazard. So these are just a couple examples. This is, right, every agency, every problem is going to have maybe its own combination of tools that we might want to use. But here's a couple of examples, right? So identifying high value vegetation management projects that benefit neighborhoods with high levels of on-parcel risk. And we'll look at this in a bit more detail in just a minute. We can look at areas where evacuation routes are vulnerable, and we might have fast moving fire with the fire pathways, and we might have opportunities for vegetation management that would alleviate some of that risk. Tracking risk over time, that's where the on-parcel risk assessment and some of the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment can work together to understand how are we reducing risk in the built environment. So these are just a couple of examples of how these tools can overlay. So to kind of give you a sense of, okay, that sounds great, right? That's conceptual, but to give you a sense of how that would actually look in a real example project, I'll take that first example here, looking at how high value vegetation management opportunities might benefit areas that have high on parcel risk loads, right? Like they're not prepared to receive fire. How can we do vegetation management that might benefit those communities? This is purely an example, right? So these aren't really recommendations here, but just an example of how these tools could point us in the right direction. So first off, we're going to look at the on-parcel risk assessment. We're going to look at all of the data from the defensible space home evaluations, and so that's home hardening and defensible space characteristics on the parcel. And we'll bin them to sort of these 100-meter hexagons, and we'll get a sense of which hexagons are our hotspots. These are the areas that may be least prepared to withstand fire when exposed. And so we take the top quartile of those, right? We get some sort of priority areas in terms of on-parcel risk. We use the fire pathways to understand, okay, here are our areas that we really want to make sure fire stays out of. How is fire likely to get there? And we can see right under our different wind and weather scenarios, those will look a little bit different. But when we overlay them, these lines are the ways that we think fire would spread most rapidly into the areas of highest on-parcel risk. And now here's the context, right? Southern Marin wants to do a perimeter fuel break in the vicinity of Mill Valley. How can we use these tools together to understand where that perimeter fuel break maybe should be larger, maybe could be smaller, maybe should take a slightly different shape? So we'll overlay those pathways that lead to those vulnerable areas of the community. That's that purple layer. And we'll say, we really would like to do work right in the vicinity of Mill Valley. That's the sort of the teal color here. And then we really, really want to do work where those two things overlap, right? So we take our sort of like overall framing or context for the problem, which is a perimeter field break, and we ask our model to tell us where many different pieces of information are asking us to focus, right? And so we'll plug that into Vibrant Planet. And Vibrant Planet, we can do a variety of different sort of valuations, right? We can assess multiple benefits. We can do that sort of an interactive process of creating those recommendations or suggestions. And again, this is just purely an example, but what we can kind of come up with at the other side is a set of polygons that might be good to explore in some further detail. So that's what we're going to see in these blue polygons here. And when we kind of put that together with the existing projects, so for example, the Summit Ralston field break here in the middle, some of the work that Marin Water's been doing, some of the work that County Fire's been doing, we start to really create what appears to be a really effective potential plan for a perimeter field break around Mill Valley, right? And this isn't like a, okay, great, let's go break ground on these projects, but more like a, great, this gives us a starting point to refine these boundaries, to understand them in some more detail, to apply some, on the ground knowledge about what's happening there in a way that is much more science driven than, right, kind of drawing on the map where we might want to go. And we can then take those backwards, right? And we can look at, okay, where were those fire pathways? How does this proposed or suggested set of polygons interrupt those pathways? And where are those potential treatment possibilities in relation to the built environment, those areas that have the highest on-parcel hazard? So again, purely example, but I think is really illustrative in terms of how we might use multiple tools together to answer this question. And in this case, the design of a new shaded fuel break, but it could be another question. For example, the question could be, where are evacuation routes potentially impinged by fire pathways, where vegetation management could reduce that risk? So very similar process, but allows us to kind of answer the question in a similar way, right? So again, here's just these blue polygons are potential suggestions to consider in some more detail in the Novato area, and just overlaying those fire pathways so we can get a sense of like, what is the impact of this potential project area. So that's what I've got for you today. I just wanted to kind of contextualize that, help compare, contextualize why we might use these tools and how they can work together. Of course, I have potential answers to any questions you have around the tools themselves, and Vibrant Planet and STI can, of course, help as well.
Thanks so much, Scott. A couple points. You may recall that Southern Marin proposed a planning effort to take a look at opportunities on the landscape and take a look at the existing shaded fuel break network down there. And so that's been a really great opportunity to dig into these tools with that as kind of the goal, thinking through where best to put new polygons or augment existing polygons on the landscape. So you'll see a lot of examples in some of our materials in Southern Marin, because that's where we're actively testing. So it's been a really exciting conversation there. I want to just share my last slide here, and then Vibrant Planet is on the call too. And Hannah, I'm going to invite you to say a few words if there's anything you'd like to add. This last slide, just some next steps. So right now, member agency staff have been working with the different contractors, meeting individually, talking through, potential project ideas, potential questions to ask the different models, and digging in. And so later on this month, we're going to regroup that kind of working group and talk through, how's it going? What are we learning? So the idea is to really test and try to break the tools, figure out how useful they are and how best to incorporate them into our processes. So we'll be able to report back out to this group on that progress after that kind of regrouping happens. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hannah, thanks so much for joining today. If you have anything you'd like to add, please feel free. But I'm putting you on the spot, so feel free to just introduce yourself and hop off if that's what you'd prefer.
No worries. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Hannah Young. I'm Partnership Success Manager here at Vibrant Planet. So really just here to help answer questions about the tool. And also, I think really cool to see both Anne and Scott, your presentations on how the tool is being used in conjunction with so many other tools and a really thoughtful context on the landscape. I think that's always the goal with the tool. So happy to see that in action. And yeah, here to answer questions if you have them.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah. So that's it for slides. Happy to open it up to discussion, questions, etc. Thanks.
All right. And the folks from Vibrant Planet, I mean, first of all, just wow, right? Wow. I knew that this was going on, with our teams, and that, but I just want everybody to stop and pause to think about, where we were before this effort was started and where we're positioned right now, going forward at about the midpoint of this organization. I mean, this is phenomenal that we have all of this information, all of these tools and the people and the structure in place to begin to execute effectively on this and what this means to our communities. And of course, we can't do it fast enough, but look at where we are. I mean, you should really be proud of the work. I'm super proud of the work that you all are doing. It's amazing to me. So that's just a comment I have. But any comment or questions from the group?
Excuse me. Well, you stole my word. Wow, I was going to go with that as well. Big thanks, Mark, to you and your team. Scott, yours team as well. I had the opportunity to participate in some of the discussions around methodology and all of that. And as a transparent propeller head, this is the stuff that I really get jazzed about as well. And this goes back to when we started this JPA and our vision of being able to have data-driven decisions for planning and prescriptive methods, as well as being able to engage in in conversations in our community. Yesterday, we had our annual Mill Valley City Council planning session, and we had a large discussion on the issue of this risk. And our community and our elected officials are very informed and very intelligent and are asking really good questions. These tools will really help us in that dialogue. It will point between the investment and the value or the outcome. And so, again, a big thanks, Mark, to the team, Scott, you and your team as well. I feel like we're on the right path, and this is really exciting. I can't wait to actually be using these tools and having them part of the dialogue that we have with the community. Thanks, Bill.
Any other comments or questions from the group?
Same thing, outstanding. Proud of you. Proud of everybody. This is really awesome. Can I just get a copy of that PowerPoint? Can you send that to us? Because I want to definitely tell the story. That's super amazing. Great work.
Thank you. Yes, we'd be happy to add these slides to the archives. They'll be available online for this committee and the public.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have some questions. Just to clarify, one is the pathways analysis complete for all jurisdictions?
Scott, why don't you address that question, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for sure. So we have completed pathways for about 30 communities. And so that is the extent of the analysis that we've planned, because the pathways are really a community-centric risk assessment tool. Running them just straight in open areas does not make sense, or open space, right? Like they need to be completed around communities. And so that's complete. We are working actively on getting agency staff access to a sort of a self-service tool for how they can use these pathways in their day-to-day. I met with County Fire yesterday, and they're like, give me the GIS data. So certainly an active conversation, but that data should be available. And at this point, we're really just working on how to make that most useful to integrate into sort of active and ongoing planning discussions.
So with regards to the pathways, there was, looked like, multiple directions that were looked at. There was the turnaround west wind days, and then otherwise there was a northeast direction. Are you finding that some of the suggested or already completed projects, fuel breaks, are they working both ways? Are you finding that we already have some things in place that are on target, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the Southern Marin case that we kind of walked through, that's certainly the case in a couple of the areas on the north side of the potential project. Right, you get a exposure to a northeast wind day fire and to a west wind fire. That's definitely the case. And then in terms of fire pathways in general, because they're sort of opposite from each other, you often get that lineup of what is a pathway on a northeast wind day. You often are also a pathway on a west or generally a west wind day. So that's something that we evaluate in terms of the success of those projects, and B, something that we can look at in terms of where those new projects might be most effective, where there really is exposure on both of those angles. So yes, in a couple of different contexts.
And can you tell me what the max, or I don't know, assumed wind speeds are when you run these pathways?
Yeah, so the Diablo wind is going to be a 30 mile an hour wind, and the west wind is an 18 mile an hour wind. So certainly less than we see in the LA fires, but is very representative of and is based on historical events that represent kind of the historic extreme fire weather in the Bay Area and Marin specifically.
And specifically, Bill, the Diablo wind is October 8th, 2017. And then the dry onshore sea breeze was October 8th, coincidentally, 2020. Those were two of the strongest events that we were able to find in the weather data.
Okay. With regards to the on parcel assessments, I think it was mentioned that the assessments don't include or into modeling structure to structure. And I just think for our group, it's something to think about how those assessments might be modified, or whether some other tool is looking at, say, distances of structures, distances of accessory units, whatever, right? That would need to be interrupted either through not being there or through hardening. It seems to me that needs to get somehow calculated into that.
And I'll start off an answer to your question, and I see Charlotte is available to probably finish this off. Dr. Hussam Mahmood from University of Colorado is one of the first people to develop a structure spread model. And we did do a beta test with him that was partially funded by Marin Wildfire and partially funded by the Moore Foundation. And we were using the Kent Woodlands as an example. So we do have the initial results of the analysis that we are evaluating now. We didn't bring those to the group yet because we just didn't feel that tool was to the point we were ready to bring that in. But we do have a beta test. And Charlotte, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yes, Mark. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. We're evaluating the results of the pilot. And actually Scott is heavily involved in helping with that effort because he helped provide the data to Colorado State. It's not quite as applied as we'd like it to be. It's a little bit more of a still very much academic and research sort of feeling. So because it was a pilot, so it's not being developed all over Marin, only the Kent Woodlands have it. And B, because we are trying to really vet the results and figure out how actionable they are in terms of decision making and aligning budget with these priorities. Those are the two reasons that tool is not yet available. And as far as I know, that's the state of the industry right now, right? We are all sort of looking at each other, and there's a lot of efforts coming out of Berkeley and different places to model the propagation in the built environment. So we're per the Marin Wildfire Board direction, we are constantly evaluating the progress in the field until we find an effort that can be vetted and is also actionable for implementation purposes. So that's where we're at.
And Chief, if I could just add one more thing, right? Like as we're waiting on how we can like use these structure to structure spread models at scale. One of the things we're integrating into this assessment as we like, roll it out to more of the agency planning process is an assessment of structure separation distance. So like not only do you have a lot of risk factors found during the DSI visits, but you're also in an area with like 10-foot structure separation distance. We can now show that on a map. So we get a sense of like, what are those critical neighborhoods where not necessarily like mechanistically structure to structure spread is like super likely, but like at least heuristically, these are areas that could sustain structure to structure spread, like just from a structure separation distance perspective.
Okay. The next question was, how does these tools and the data that's coming out fit potentially into a statewide data commons, that I've heard about?
Very much in alignment. And that's the good thing is that we've been in direct contact with Milliman, who has the funding to help create the data commons. And they are very much looking at Marin, our level of data and an analysis as a platform or as an example of how to create the bigger data commons that would be most likely in the Western United States, not just California.
Okay. And then last question I have is, do you have enough people who know how to use these tools to be able to, best inform and create these projects? We know who we have right now, but do we really have enough? Are they helping across the zones, or is that a gap?
It's a little bit of a gap, I'll be honest with you, only because it's the learning curve. And so we have great consultants working with us, and each of the zones actually are starting to dip their toe into the use of these tools.
Yeah.
So are we exactly where we need to be, or are we 100% proficient? No. But are we on a path, and do we have the right people in the right place to get there? Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the group?
I just have a general question. So member agencies reach out to Willow Labs, and then is there bandwidth amongst Willow Labs for all of us to start working with each other right now, or is this in a tiered process and we're waiting?
Yeah, great question. And Stinson Beach and some of our West Marin agencies and Muir Beach and Southern Marin Zone, we are actively taking a look at those areas and doing a lot of project planning with Scott and Vibrant Planet and others, and have met with our one-TAM partners to look at forest health data, because as you all know, the regulatory process in coastal Marin is much more onerous than inland areas. And so we're actually about to reach out to you to kind of review where we are and think through next steps. Yeah.
Okay, can we go out to public, see if there's any comments?
And we do have one hand raised, Larry Minikis. Oh, and Charlotte, if you wanted to add something.
I wanted to mention the CWPP, Mark, but I think you want to take public comments first.
Sure. Larry, you should be able to talk shortly. There we go.
There we go. Just reflecting Chief Tyler's comments and comments of the board there. We're about 5 years in now, and we've made tremendous progress. I know no one's resting on their laurels here. We all know there's tremendous work ahead of us, but I agree, we have a lot to be proud of, a lot to be thankful for, and just offering my good words towards you folks for all the work that we're doing. And with that, thank you so much, Charlotte.
Thanks, Larry. And I'll kind of tee it up for Charlotte. As we were working on the request for proposals for our updated CWPP, which, because we've been on a goal of every 5 years to update it. when we were writing the CWPP, there we were going, wow, this is almost exactly like what we are working on right now. So the RFP for the CWPP is very much like what you just saw. And as you guys are probably seeing, as you watch the industry in CWPPs, they are no longer a static document because our current CWPP is a snapshot of 2019. And people are going to dynamic CWPPs that they are growing and the data and analysis adjusts as we go. And so that's exactly the type of CWPP that we have put the RFP out for. So Charlotte?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think just in response to some of the questions from the committee today, you know, we are making tremendous progress. We've developed these incredible tools that are very useful in giving us that data aspect of things and that data and science driven decisions. As your committee's perfectly put the finger on, we're not quite at the point where everything is consolidated and there's a clear path. You want to do this. This is how we're still playing with these tools and investigating them and building the trust with our member agencies. The CWPP RFP is asking respondents to propose how they would integrate all the tools you saw today into one cohesive framework to establish priorities. So that's our next step, right? We're making great progress in using each of these tools sort of individually and getting trust and vetting them against what we know in the field. The next step is to get us to that prioritized list based on each agency's objectives and agendas.
Excellent. Okay. Still a couple meaty topics here in the queue. So let's move on to 9B, which is the work plan development strategic guidance.
Great, thank you. So we wanted to revisit, I'm just going to pull up a couple of slides here and share my screen again. So each year the Operations Committee provides strategic guidance for the development of that year's work plan or the next year's work plan. And this year we are revisiting the strategic guidance that this committee came up with last year. And one of the asks was to review the proposals that have already been approved and kind of in relation to these different strategies that the Operations Committee came up with previously. So what we did, and big thank you to Stephen Peters who helped me do this, we took a look at this current work plan, the work plan that's currently being implemented, and then a few key proposals that from the previous work plan, and just listed out a few things. So one, number of proposals that address the different strategies that this group came up with, and then kind of the total relative dollar amount allocated to each of these strategies with a few assumptions that I'll talk about. So to review the different strategies that you all have seen previously and approved last year, number one is house out. Continue the house out approach. Number two is related to home hardening and DSpace. So continue to reduce wildfire risk to communities by providing resources directly to residents for home hardening and defensible space activities. Number three is related more to veg management, fuel breaks. And the text is prioritize shaded fuel breaks directly adjacent to communities and explore the potential for strategically placed landscape area treatments or splats informed by pathways modeling. Number four is related to prescribed fire. Expand the use of prescribed fire and public education and involvement around beneficial fire. Number five is related to evacuations. The text is continue to prioritize evacuation planning and projects to improve safe and efficient evacuations. Number six, insurance. Partner with insurance companies and the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS, to help avoid insurance cancellations and control costs for homeowners. Number seven is related to public education. Increase public education, particularly to new audiences. Support activities that fire agencies and Marin residents can take, such as home hardening and DSpace, especially in Zone 0, safe evacuations, and reducing human-caused ignitions. So if you take a look at the last work plan and you make some assumptions so that, you know, operations costs for MWPA applies to all of them. So that's one applied to each one. GIS applies to all of them. So that counts as a proposal that applies to all of them. If you take a look at kind of the relative number of proposals that address each of these, you're looking at around 50 for the house out approach. So a lot of the inspections, grant programs, etc. Home hardening and D-space around 60, fuel breaks around 48, prescribed fire, much less, 7, and really you're talking about county fires, support for prescribed burns. Greater Novato shaded fuel break includes some broadcast burning, and some open space work in San Rafael, which hasn't been approved yet, but will eventually include some broadcast burning. Evacuations, that's about 33 proposals. Insurance, that's 3, although mostly that's Mark doing his work. Pub Ed, that's about 45 different proposals that address Pub Ed in one way or another. So that's a total of 132 proposals. And then if you take a look at this is kind of relative effort in relation to these different proposals. So, or different strategies, 1 through 7. So on the left, this is the relative number of proposals addressing each of these strategies. And then on the right, the relative budget allocated to each of these strategies. So this might help the discussion today in terms of where you think or how you think we're doing in terms of addressing each of these strategies. They're all important in their own way. This group could decide to continue with the same strategies as were approved last year, or we could decide to explore edits, additions, etc. So I'm just going to go back to the text here so that you have the strategies in front of you. And I'm happy to answer any questions or feel free to discuss any potential edits.
Okay. Members, any comments, questions on, what our existing strategic guidance is and whether and how you see something either missing or needing to be amplified, prioritized, strengthened? Any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I would I would say that insurance at a 3, from what I'm hearing from my residents, that is extremely low, and that's a huge concern for people. And if there's any way to get some more numbers on that, that would be probably a good goal for this committee.
Let me just ask Mark, Mark, can you say what those 3 were?
Probably not off the top of my head. However, I will argue that the house out approach, home hardening and D-space, and the fuel breaks plays very well into the insurance aspect of it. So while we only list 3, the collateral benefit from those first 3 categories greatly goes into the insurance question.
Chris?
And if you don't mind, just adding those, sorry, those 3 are really just kind of the infrastructure of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, the budget that goes towards GIS, for example, the budget that goes towards data modeling and those tools that we talked about. Those all contribute towards this effort and Mark and his time. So those are kind of generalized efforts that contribute towards this, but no proposals within the last work plan were specific to this insurance question.
Yeah, just following up on Chief Perry's comments. So yeah, there is certainly in Southern Marin, a tremendous amount of energy around the insurance issue. I don't know that I would necessarily sort of put it in this area on the work plan, but maybe a future discussion item is that a lot of the questions that we're hearing from the community are, what are the things that we're doing that have a direct correlation to insurance premiums? We know that's very difficult. A lot of creative solutions being offered. I have a board member that wants us to start suing the insurance industry. And so I think where we can have information, a healthy discussion about being able to engage effectively with the community and leaders might be a good future topic. But I don't think it's necessarily in this particular area as far as a guiding strategy for work.
And I can share with you a presentation that I gave to, so as you know, as you probably know, Commissioner Lahr commissioned Cal Poly Humboldt to create a publicly created cat risk model for pricing insurance or deciding whether or not to insure in California. So I was asked to present to the strategic working group that's creating that. So I'm happy to represent that to you folks because it outlines a lot of what we are doing in Marin. And what I expressed to them is that we need some success stories. What's sad is how much work that we have been doing in Marin, I can't point to a success story. And that we need to change that. And it's not on our shoulders, so it's on the insurance industry to look at that. So, but I'm happy to put together a comprehensive list of what we are doing and give you guys a presentation on that.
Yeah, and another partnership that we had with IBHS had to do with Ember Stomp, and we managed to convince them to bring down the live fire burn demonstration where they had 2 homes that were built, one ignition resistant construction with proper zone 0 and separations, and then the other was just traditional, what everybody has for the most part, and in front of about 2,000 people or so. Dropped a little bit of fire on the ground, and we watched one of those 2 burn to the ground. And so the areas that I think I see potentially IBHS principles, because they've got the research centers and all that, it dovetails into the code adoption piece, because there's the opportunity to try and bring that ignition resistant construction features in at higher levels. Likely the state, even with Chapter 7A requirements, stops a little bit short of where wildfire prepared homes and wildfire prepared homes plus lands. And so that's going to be, I think, something that could get discussed in the code section to decide what and how far the public is willing to go to bring that in. Because once you reach those levels, wildfire prepared home and plus, that is the pathway for insurance companies recognizing that either at an individual level or at expanding to the neighborhood level. And that's the other thing that's going to be coming that I think we didn't have in our list so far was, we're focused on the individual parcel level and those making then communities, so you get neighborhoods. But I think there's going to be a lot more attention from insurance on prepared neighborhoods rather than just a one-off home.
And you're kind of dipping into agenda item 9C, which is potential updates to fire codes. And thinking out loud, Ann and I were talking about, do we want to make that part of the ops committee strategy for this work plan to be supporting the member agencies for consistent zone 0 ordinances across the board?
Yeah, I don't want to marginalize the issue of insurance because it is important, but I think, it's good for us to revisit what our primary objective is here, and that is the preservation of the property and the contents and the memories and of all those things. And I think it's very easy to allow the conversation to divert off into the insurance piece and then marginalize the property preservation. And ultimately, that's what our real goal is here.
Okay, any other questions or comments based on our existing strategy or things that they want to potentially add or remove or reprioritize? When I looked at that list in the presentation, I mean, I think we're solidly in a lane addressing where those risks are, and everyone has spent this first 4 years really focusing. And so it seems to me that we're in a lane where we need to be and where we need to stay, given the funding that's available to us. And but I do think that this year's work plan, and it's the next item, but talking through how do we come up with a series of potentially code amendments to the code that's coming in a given area that needs to still be defined. Because some people would argue that these requirements might need to go beyond what we would normally consider wildland urban interface areas, might be, into other areas. But that are all those arguments and all those discussions can happen later. But I do think that for this next year's plan, we need to have a piece, because what happens is the code is going to be adopted by California, and then we'll have 180 days, which gets us down to, actually they'll finally adopt it. They're starting now. They'll finally adopt it, I believe, at the end of June of this year, and then we'll have 180 days to make changes. So that will fall into the next work plan. So I would just recommend that we include in our items as one of the focal points is having at least discussions and seeing if we can come up with standardized approaches to that, or how far can we go and agree that these are the changes that we need to have, and these are the areas where we need to do it. And if we cannot convince, and I think there's better arguments to be made when we can integrate more of these tools into the discussion to really show people. But we're going to need to bring forward and have those discussions so we can see how far that we'll actually go. And there's no better example than what's happening in Los Angeles and for people to, and my office is getting tons and tons of calls and interest on this. And these are the moments to bring these things forward and see if we can get it across the line in a way that will work for everyone. So I think that should be added.
And so if I can suggest we take public comment on 9B now and then go into 9C, because I think having that 9C conversation, then we can circle back and plug it into the strategic guidance from the ops committee. So any public comment on 9B? Not seeing any hands raised. How we were going to kick this off is first of all, talk about the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association meeting the other day.
Well, hold on one second. So are we suspending 9B action on that? Because we have to.
It was just a discussion item. So what we've done in the past is that anyone who had any suggested edits, they send them in to Ann, and the next time we bring it, we include those suggested edits. But if you have anything right now,
okay, so it's not action you need, it's just comments that you're going to refine the plan with.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any other thing that they see needed? Okay, let's move on.
All right. Sorry, Bill.
Thank you.
So at the last Marin County Fire Chiefs Association meeting, there was very strong support across all of the fire agencies to work with their elected officials for a Zone 0 ordinance. And the recommendation from the fire chiefs was, we have our fire prevention officers who help work together, they work together to create a consistent code recommendations. So the suggestion was the fire chiefs tasked to FPOs to start creating consistent code recommendations based on what the state adopts, and work together as a group to bring to the fire chiefs their recommended ordinances, and then have the fire chiefs bring it through the elected officials in that process. When we brought up Zone 0 with the board of directors that same day, very strong support during the meeting and continued strong support since the meeting. And just had a great question from Director Kurtz on some of the data that we have in DSI that can help paint the picture of where we are in regard to Zone 0 in Marin and where we need to be in regard to Zone 0 in Marin. A lot of her questions I could already answer with the reports that are built into Fireside. There are about 3 or 4 reports that weren't already built in, so Fireside's already on it. They promised me by the end of the day that we'll have, it's about 8 questions. And then through Fireside, we'll be able to slice and dice. We say, Novato, this is exactly where you're at. Southern Marin, this is exactly where you're at. JPA-wide, this is exact. So it's going to be great information as we bring all of this information to the elected officials. That was 1. 2, Dan Mahoney had a good idea of trying to create a standardized, at least a video of us that all of the fire chiefs can use when they bring the codes and you work with Fire Safe Marin to create this video that shows visually why we need to do this, but obviously in a succinct way, that so when you guys go and present to your boards or councils, you have a consistent tool or consistent messaging. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and definitely that's where we can build that into the recommendations for the work plan.
Any questions for Mark about that code development process and potential tools to be able to help us?
You guys, especially you, Bill, you've done code adoptions far more times than I have. So we're going to be leaning on the guys who have done this a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had some practical experience with obviously code development and trying to deal with the built environment, which is the hardest, right? The built environment. And we're watching LA now where they're going to rebuild and how are they going to rebuild? And are they going to, rebuild in a way that's more resilient? Or are they going to just try and get it back the way it was as quickly as they can? We'll see. But we have built environments here, and there's been examples in Mill Valley, following the Tubbs fire and Chief Welch and how he tried to, work and strong. I mean, it was tip of the spear stuff, right? And I think he's going to be long remembered for trying to do the right thing. But we have just a highly resistive public environment. I know Dave Winokur over in Orinda Moraga has talked about this, and it's also documented that, the struggles that he had, given all of the best arguments that he could make, with facts and everything else backing him up, and still running into public resistance. This is the nut to crack. The zone zero is the thing, and we have to change people's way that they view their homes. This is the sea change that has to occur. If this changes, I think other things fall in behind this. So it's definitely worth all of our efforts to try and be able to do this for people. Sometimes we have to lead people where they don't want to go. And so I think this may be that time.
Hey, Chief, can I add to that? So I do think timing is of the essence too, and we don't have a lot of time, but it is how the dominoes fall too, right? At the state level, at least they're not probably going to weigh in on the local side. We talked about this yesterday. I don't think they have the political will. They'll have too many hits. But if they do it at the state and the state and federal lands, for us to be ready to go, and you guys are already doing it, so thank you. But pushing like our inner circle of having the county go, and then we all go next. And I would recommend that we have a really good multifaceted team as we move forward as our number one priority. This is it, because this is the only way we're going to get insurance moving forward. Nothing else is going to matter. And so how we package that, how we move forward. And I wouldn't leave a chief by themselves unless they want to be in any of the meetings with their electeds. I think we go with our team, whoever that is, and we hit them, regionally and tell the story. This meeting that you referenced in Mill Valley, I wasn't there for it, but I remember watching it, and I've talked to a lot of people. It was the most contentious thing in Mill Valley ever. The history of Mill Valley. Mill Valley everything's contentious, right? So it was painful, and so it's just a lesson learned from that. We should really learn from it of timing, and it's going to take all of us to move it, and it should be our number one priority, I think.
Yeah, great comment. Anybody else comments? Okay, we'll go to public.
Looking at the public, and we have no raised hands.
Sorry, this is not an action item, but this is the approach going forward. And, I think we're all looking to see this included into the work plan. And I completely agree that this needs to be, one of the things that we all do together. And I like the team approach. That's a great idea. Just like when we went to try and launch MWPA, let's have a team and let's go do that. Great stuff. Okay. Did we go out to public? We did. Okay, so item 10 is just committee members' requests regarding future agenda items. Okay, we just know we're moving forward that one item to next time, and that's now we're at, out to the public for future agenda items.
No raised hands.
Okay, we're at adjournment then, so we're adjourned.